Hello, this is Arnel Tanyag with Tanyag Company. I'm just doing a video on what I learned in the week of June 9th to June 13th. So one of the things I learned is when working with clients is what's your lead generation look like? What are your numbers? So I'm working with a gentleman right now that he wants to double his revenue. So we came up with certain numbers he has to figure out. So one of the things we asked him, what's the number of dials you got to do a day in a week? And he goes, what do you mean dials? How many people you have to talk to? How many people you have to dial to actually talk to people? So we had number of dials, number of conversations to get sales appointments, right? And number of sales appointments. So he said that's what we're tracking. So we figured out he's got to talk to actually 45 people a week, asking them, does he know anybody who needs this product and service? So he's got to talk to 45 people a week, 5 days a week, 9 people a day. So he's just got to get hustling. So if he talks to 9 people a day, right, that's 45 a week, we figured out he should get enough appointments and actually close the sales he wants. So now we're being tracking it for the first 1 or 2 weeks, and he's going to have data, and then we'll be able to pinpoint what the average sale is, number of dials that lead to conversations to sales appointments, how many sales appointments he actually closes, what's his closure ratio. We'll figure all that stuff out because this is the first time he's tracking it. And then we can always, if his average sale is 2,000, okay, how do we get it up to 4,000? Does he got to get in front of more people? Or does he need to go after the right target market? But so the question is, what is your numbers around lead generation? Again, number of dials, number of conversations, to get sales appointments, number of sales appointments. The other thing we talk about lead generation, I was talking to a potential client. I asked her, what are your most profitable product and services that you make the most money for? And she was listing certain product services. And I said, well, who are the ideal clients that actually buy that? She was like, huh. She's looking at that in her client list. She said, architects, engineers, construction companies. I said, can you confirm that? She said, yeah, most of them are my most profitable are architects, engineers, and construction companies. And I said to her, that's great, because then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and figure out what marketing channel will access, again, engineers, construction, and architect. So in lead generation, once we know the specific product and services are profitable, there is usually certain ideal clients for that, right? And then how do we access them? What is the marketing channel? The goal injected with that is once we know that information, we can drill down specifically to get the results you want. The interesting thing, I was talking to a client and I was talking to, a business owner and was talking about succession planning and looking at some research. And we found out that family-owned businesses on average last for 25 years. This is based on the familybusinesscenter.com 2010, 24 years. Wow. About 40% of the U.S. family-owned businesses transition to the second generation. It's less than 13%. And then when they pass down to the third generation, it's less than 3% that survive. And so it's really interesting when you look at it, 40% of the business owners for first or second, that's the transition. So 60% don't make it. And then from there to third, you go to the third generation, less than 3%. And this is coming from Business Week 2010. And I can see this for most successors. And I'll tell you why, because I work with a lot of successors. The biggest thing I see that they don't realize is they got to lead the transition. They got to take lead. Because when somebody knows they start a family-owned business, the founder doesn't always know about succession planning until they get older. They don't start early. But then the key employee or the daughter or son who's there wants to take on the business, they really need to say, hey, I want to learn the business, this and that, and I want to take lead. And when it's time, they need to go ahead and present a formal transition plan. Now, they can bring in somebody who does a succession plan, but they really can bring in they can start doing the leading part early. Because very rare do I see that happen. I have a client who in New York's been with me for 5 years. It's a 6th generation family-owned business. I was referred to them from another coach, and they told me specifically, we told our parents we wanted to buy the business and lead it. I said, what happened? Well, we gave them a NAP agreement, nothing happened. I said, well, I said, okay, let's bring a third party in. Let's work on the succession planning. And then a year later, they transitioned. I said, you have to bring a third party in. And you need to lead it. You need to lead it as soon as possible, because what happens is between the family dynamics and everyday pressures of life and everything going on, challenges, you got to take the lead. Even if they have formal succession planning, you got to say, let's move this forward. Meaning that you could have somebody do the succession planning, but then you need somebody to help you lead the company. Start acting leader. Start working with your family members to start leading, writing the plan, get the thing going. Because when your founders or your parents or the next generation sees you leading, they're going to feel confident that, wow, they're doing this, versus most successors just wait on the current leadership, current owners to go, okay, we're ready. No, you got to go. And sometimes you may not know how to go, how to start. That's where you got to hire somebody who can help you navigate that quick and fast. If not, you'll be that 60% and then never go from the first generation to second generation. And then you'll be that 3% that, 3% that actually make it, because it's the third generation. One of the major insights that I've seen over the last couple of weeks is that in the hiring, because I have some companies that actually employ me to help them hire off Indeed. And one of the things I've been working with over the last year or two doing this is we test positive intelligence. We use the positive intelligence, the book that was written by Shazad Sharmain about positive intelligence. He has two tests, which is measuring how your mind stays positive versus negative. And then when it's negative, what are those patterns that sabotage you from being successful in any aspect of business, from sales, leadership, management, to even your personal lives, including your relationships that's most important to you. So we use that in hiring, because what we find out, if they're like 60% negative and 40% positive, and then their saboteurs, there's like 9 of them, and they score like 9, I recommend we don't hire that person. And the reason is because they already think negative, they're already sabotaging themselves. And then when they get in your new role and there's a lot of new change, they're not able to adapt. And a lot of companies, since they don't recognize this as a measuring tool of how that person will respond, they usually get in there for maybe the first 90, 30, 60 days, and they struggle. It's even worse if they don't have any planning, accountability, or training. But if they're already negative and they already have saboteurs that are really high, they'll sabotage themselves. So one of the things I always recommend when you hire people, you should test them on the 2 positive intelligence tests. Because when I work with clients, I say we have to do that, because I've noticed in the last year when I've helped people hire them and they don't do that, those positive intelligence tests, especially saboteurs and negative versus positive, what happens is if somebody's negative, again, I said they're negative, their saboteurs high, they can't adjust well. They can't adjust to your standard. They're not able to handle change, because going to a new role is very stressful, especially if you don't have a lot of training. If you do have a training, but they're already negative and they're sabotaged, it's just not going to work. So you really have to add that in your hiring, because without that, you'll struggle. The other thing I've noticed, that I was talking to a couple people, and I was talking to a fractional CEO. He was like, I know people out there networking, and he's like people are just going out everywhere. Because what people do when they think about networking, they go everywhere. And when they have that belief, they're just looking for clients, or do they go into a niche? I usually tell people from my experience, if you already know your niche, if you know your target market clients, you got to go there. You got to go where they're at, because there are some professional trade organizations, and I recommend, that are highly active that can go there, and you can build relationships. You can meet people there. But once if you don't know your niche and you're not really sure, maybe you pick a couple and go there, but don't do general networking, because there's so much general networking. And what people don't realize, it takes a lot of time, especially if you're say you're in a room of 10 people and you meet 5 people, and out of 5, none of them are target market. None of them can have paid for your service. None of them None of them actually need none of them can pay for your service, and maybe three, maybe two, one or two of them need your service, but they can't pay for it. So all that time and effort isn't worth it. I'd rather tell people to go where their niches are. And the other thing I've noticed too, where most people don't have a process, a networking process to measure their success in networking. So how do you measure success in networking? There's only a couple ways. Number one, if you're getting referrals. If you're getting referrals from people you're networking with, that's a great success. Number two, or if you're getting clients from that, right? But you're not soliciting clients right off the bat. I've seen people go networking, they meet somebody, they try to sell them really quickly, and it's crazy. I mean, I go to events and I watch this all the time. That guy's trying to sell you, and so I was like, and it's exhausting. Other times, you will be building relationships with people, and people will use your product and service just because the fact they value you as a person in the business and they see a need. But that comes out of a relationship develop versus trying to prospect. I see a lot of people networking to prospect, right? Versus they should be networking in their niche to build a network. But even if you're building the network, you got to have a networking process that measures success and has a way to develop these people you meet. It's either into a raving fan, that's a person who goes out of your way to refer you business all the time, an advocate, a person who gives you referrals, introduction, people ask, or somebody who just, when your name pops up, there may not be advocate, they say good things about you. Or I've seen people do this where literally, from networking, if they're not a raving fan, if they're not a raving fan, advocate, or somebody who's met you, talked to you, and they say, hey, he's a great guy, this and this and that. The best thing to do, I tell people at the end of the day, is you really have to figure out that you want people to either say no. I mean, it's okay to have people say no, because at the end of the day, they want to be a client, I'm a raving fan. You can still treat them well, but you don't have to spend any time. So how I measure success in networking is clients, raving fans, advocates, or people who give me good word of mouth, right? The other thing what you want to do is I've noticed that some people that I work with work in companies and they're having to talk to immediate supervisor. How do I talk to immediate supervisor? How do I talk to somebody who I report to and we don't see eye to eye, right? And, I have several clients that I work with that we're working through this, right? So I say to them, okay, how are you can present, what you need to present to them? So there's a couple good frameworks. There is one that you can use called Fierce Conversations or Crucial Conversation. Fierce Conversations and Crucial Conversation. They're great frameworks to help you determine how do you communicate to immediate supervisor, how do you communicate to somebody who works with you on your team. And both of them are really good, because I have a client right now, he's working, talk to his supervisor because there's pressure for him to produce, and he's like, how do I talk? So we basically, I gave him the framework, here's what you need to say and ask. And then he writes out his thoughts, and then we role play it on the phone. And then he literally goes out there and he presents to his immediate supervisor. And he's doing that for his immediate supervisor. He's doing it for people on his team who work with him, because he's the team leader and he's got other team leaders under him. So he's learning how to have that conversation. We call it fierce or crucial. So, and we work through that framework, because when you're leading, you're going to have conversations to get people's insight, buy-in, or where they're coming from. So you really have to have some type of framework. So a lot of times when I work with people, when they're communicating with somebody, they're not really sure, we do our best to present that in a way that they can address it. So that literally what happens to them, they're able to get their point across, and then they're nervous as heck when they're talking to these supervisors or their key people. But if we, become, I call it positive intelligent, have the framework, they're able to navigate. We practice with role play, and it works out really well. Because when you're growing a business, and when you get over 1 million and above, it's around the people part. It's around communicating, it's around influencing, around how to read people, how to communicate, how to coach, and most importantly, how to have these, they call it how to handle conflict, And I usually use a framework: fierce conversation or crucial conversation. It's a preference, a choice, which one works one for the other, but they're powerful frameworks. But you need that because sometimes you may not understand, or sometimes you do understand, but you need to influence the person. How do you do that? So I always tell people, use these two frameworks, and get somebody who's really going to help you work through it and role play it, practice it, get your thoughts in paper, and you'll be surprised how that works. Because when it works great. The other thing I think where I learned this week was interesting, that I was listening to a podcast on Instagram. It talked about when you're a business coach or business advisor and you have a relationship with your clients, you bring two types of value: professional value and personal value. Professional value is your experience you have in the business. What is your expertise in the business? What knowledge, wisdom have you gained in the business arena? I've went through MAPS business coaching. That's all around learning how to do the one thing, the one-page business plan, the 401, all those related to productivity the best way I know. I have gone through positive intelligence, how to, I did their master program, understanding the saboteurs, understanding the PQ, and I use that and have clients on that. I did Michael Mayer's 7-level communication, how to get referrals. I mean, sometimes the best people who are getting referrals are real estate agents. I mean, they're the phenomenally best. Learn to do that, So exit planning, I did Exit Planning Institute, learn the process of exit planning. They have a process. So that's my professional value. I have affiliations and relationships with several companies that have systems and processes that work really well. But then what's your personal value? So in the personal value in this podcast that we're talking about, does the client feel safe with you to talk about their personal life? So a lot of the clients I coach, they feel safe to talk about their personal life because we know, and I learned this from Gary Keller, that your personal life and your business life are entwined. You really have to help people do both, not one or the other, do both, because if they're both working together and it's purposeful, things move a lot quicker and faster. So what's your personal value? So, and personal value just comes from your experiences, what you learn, what you have done. And if you can create that safe space, your clients will talk to you about what's really going on. I had a client talk about his parents getting older and how it was making him sad. And, one of his parents had some type, could have a neurological disease. And I was like, so I was listening to him and just encourage him. Look, you're taking care of him. You're spending time with him. Then I had one client who personal value, he wants to spend, he had to decide this coming week, I gotta get an important meeting with the most important person in my personal life, with his wife. I got to get that thing scheduled. How do I do this? And he's like, oh yeah. All right, let's get on it, because that's what's important to you. So personal value, when you're a great business advisor or a great business coach, the personal value, people feel safe to tell you the truth. They get to tell you what's thinking, because a lot of times when you're growing your business and you're growing it at a fast pace, or you're scaling it at a fast pace, you really need somebody to help you kind of look at all the different sides and prioritize what's important, and remind you to stay focused, to encourage you, not to judge you. I mean, one of the things that I really believe is there's no judgment, just encouragement, right? And reminder of things that they have to get ahead of, reminder of things that they need to focus on, and talk about, those things, and then challenge them to do more and do better, and become more inspirational. So that's why I was, that's why I was when I was listening to that podcast about personal value. It's what's the personal value you bring, and if you do it really well, you create a safe space for your clients to talk about the personal life. The other thing I want to talk about is, how do you know if somebody's a servant leader? And I was at an event one time, and I was doing the sign-in sheet, and so it was interesting. One of the executive committee members of the board, a really great guy, runs a very successful real estate development company. He's been there, I think the company's been around 60 years. He came out and he said, Arnel, you're doing a great job. Here's a little cup of a little bit of food and some water. I just wanted to show you, we really appreciate you. And I brought this to you. I was like, man, out of everybody in that room, there was like maybe 50, 60 people at this event. I was doing the sign-in sheet. He came out and brought me this little cup of food that they had at the event and some water. That's a servant leader. He didn't have to do that. but he did. That's somebody that I'm going to send him a nice thank you note. And when I see him, I'm bringing, I don't know if he can eat egg rolls, but I'm going to bring some egg rolls and I'm going to recognize that for him. Because that's, out of everyone in the room, he's the one who came, gave me that and recognized it. That to me is somebody's servant leader. You're always looking for people who go above and beyond, especially somebody of influence. And this gentleman is of influence. But he came out, gave me a little cup of food from the event and a water, say, thanks, you're doing a great job. Make sure you're okay. You want to come in? I said, thank you. And that's certainly is recognizing the goodness of people and going out and acknowledge them and bringing them something. So I was impressed. I mean, that is a great organization when you have leaders like him in the organization that I serve. So again, this is Arnel Tanyag with Tanyag Company. I hope this is very helpful. I'm just sharing some lessons that I learned over the last week. Again, thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, you always can write a comment, DM me, and I appreciate it. Thanks, Dan.